we're going to do some highlight clips, some highlighted topics and games here on the audio version of the podcast that will be translated into videos over at ats.io and on our ats.io YouTube page. And Kyle, we just got done talking about power ratings. And if you're only watching the video, I certainly encourage you to listen to the full audio of the podcast. But we talk about power ratings, and what we try to do there is we come up with a number. We come up with our game spread so that if the number early in the week that's out there in the betting market is far enough off from ours, we can pounce on that game because we expect that line to move in the direction of our power ratings. That's a concept called market entry, and we'll talk about it a lot here on the podcast as we go throughout the football season. But there's an increased risk in getting involved in these games early in the week now, Kyle, with COVID-19, with the positive tests and the contact tracing and all of that. So are you going to use your power ratings and those numbers that you create in the same way to enter the market early in the week this year?
That's a great question. I think market entry is going to be the biggest question mark as far as what is the right way to do it this year compared to past years. Generally, I really like to enter the market early. I want to get my line that I like early in the week before everybody gets to knock it back to where it should be in most cases. There's going to be a lot of money moving. I know there's plenty of people betting these games now. I do think that you'll probably see less moves early in the week because of what we're talking about. I know that for myself, betting sides, I bet more totals than I do sides. And, I've said that many times on the show before. I'm definitely better at totals than I am at sides. I think I'll still bet totals early in the week more often than not. At the same time, sides, you put a big bet on a side and a quarterback, has to sit out for quarantine or contact tracing reasons for COVID, you're going to be in trouble. I mean, there are some cases where, you could flat out just basically be ripping up your ticket early in the week. I'm going to be very cautious about betting sides early in the week. I think that this may not be the season to try to be too brave about grabbing those early week sides because, what are you going to lose? If you lose a point and a half or 2 points of value there, it still might be better than the chance of the line swinging 7 or 8 points the other way because several key players are sitting out. I think we saw that right away with the Austin P game in the first week, that something like that could be a real issue this year. So especially in certain parts of the country, I think that's something to consider as well. Where things are going worse when it comes to COVID, it's more likely that those schools are going to have more issues with guys sitting out. So I think that here we are in 2020. I didn't really expect that we'd be handicapping COVID in some way, but I feel like that is to some degree something that we'll have to look at. What areas of the country is this more likely to happen? What conferences is this more likely to happen? And also, as things come out, we might find out that some schools or some conferences have a little bit different rules for how often they get tested or how many players have to sit out for how long. So it's definitely part of the equation now. And I think when it comes to market entry, I'm just going to be a lot more cautious. I think I'll probably play less sides this year than I have in the past because I just think there's more questions. Uncertainty is not a very good thing to have when you're betting the sports market. So uncertainty is not the friend of the stock market. It's not your friend in sports betting as well. I think that there's so much uncertainty that you're better off waiting till later in the week, even if you might miss the very best line.
Well, and that's the thing too. We talk about the handicapping process and what we try to do, and we try to handicap as much variance out of a game as we possibly can. Sometimes you just fall on the wrong side of variance. Sometimes you're on the right side of variance, but we try to handicap to a certain degree of certainty, to a certain level where we feel comfortable and confident. And this year, that's going to be very difficult to do, with COVID, with contact tracing, with all the testing and all those types of things. And, something else that you kind of mentioned there that I want to elaborate on a little bit is that, closing line value. It's one of those things that out here in the marketplace, a lot of people talk about, a lot of people preach for a variety of different reasons. The better the number you get, the more likely you are to win. Over the course of the year, when you look at your tracking, when you look at your results, you see how much you beat the closing line by, you're going to have a handful of games that you won that you would have lost or maybe pushed if you had gotten, a worse number or had taken the closing number. And that's kind of the dilemma that we have this year is how do you weigh that risk reward of, okay, my power rating on this game is 2.5, the line's 5.5. I'm going to play it because I'm getting key numbers of 3 and 4. Yeah, you almost always want to do that in that scenario. And maybe people will this year, maybe just bet smaller amounts on it. But that's something you have to factor in is, you may get that 2.5. All of a sudden, as you said, a quarterback who's worth a touchdown to the line comes off the board. That team winds up becoming an underdog. Yeah, you got your closing line value, at least your expectation of closing line value. And then something crazy happened. And all of a sudden, you're minus 2.5. You could have gotten it +2, +2.5, +3. So it's a tough line to walk here because, again, it's drilled into all of us that are in this business. Get closing line value, get the best line that you can. It's possible this week or this season that we don't know what the best line is going to be because, there may be a lot of these positive cases. Now, also, though, with that being said, what if there aren't as many cases as we think? What if this is a situation where these teams and these players are following the protocols that they're supposed to be following, and maybe we lose a line that was a good number because we're worried of something that's happening a small percentage of the time? So, again, obviously 2020 is unique in so many ways, and talking about it in a betting context seems small in the greater scheme of everything, but market entry is a challenge this year, man. It's very, very difficult, and I don't really know what the right answer is until we start seeing not only what happens with line movements, but also what happens with the positive test rate and how many guys start sitting out from contact tracing.
Yeah, I think there isn't any perfect answer to this. I think you'll get a lot of different answers if you ask a lot of different people this question. I do think as we talk about it, it could make some sense to put a small amount down on a big difference that you have from the line early in the week and, just waiting to put the rest of the money on it, depending on what kind of news breaks throughout the week. Obviously, you might not get the same number on it, but I don't know how much you really want to hit it for the max early in the week this year because, if you're trying to put down a bunch of money and something like that happens, you're going to be kicking yourself. I mean, in some of those cases, like you said, you go from a -3 to a +3, and maybe you don't even like the +3 then. It's very possible. So, I think that this is something we're going to have to adjust to as we go, and I think it might be good to kind of us to follow up on this conversation as we go throughout the course of the season, because as we see how things go, how many instances, how many times this happens, might have to kind of adjust how we do this.
Well, and the last point I'll make here about this, and I'll get your thoughts on it, then we'll move on, is, a lot of times too, a lot of people like to dive into the market early in hopes that maybe they get a middle opportunity, not as much arbitrage in college football as you may see in a sport like baseball, money line sport or the NHL, something like that. But you like to take that early position on a game that's got some line value, then sort of see where it goes, decide if you get a middle opportunity, if you want to play it, decide if you want to buy off of it and just drink the juice. And I sort of wonder if some of the the modeling crowd, some of the people that, like us, put together their own numbers, if they just go ahead and take what they perceive to be line value and sort of worry about it later on. It's sort of one of those things like I always say in baseball, because I'm a big baseball guy, you use your best relievers that day, you win that game today, you worry about tomorrow the next day because you might score 10 runs and not need any of your best relievers. So I kind of wonder if maybe that concept applies to market entry this year, where some bettors are going to say, you know what, this is off from my number, I'm going to take it, and if something happens, then I'll worry about it later. And that all depends on your risk profile, on how much risk management you want to pursue throughout the course of the season. But maybe in some respects, you could say that some bettors may get an advantage if they jump into the market early.
It's certainly possible, and I think we should say that it depends on what kind of difference you're talking about. If we're talking about a 2.5 point edge, I'm not going to bet it early in the week. If we're talking about something that's 5.5 points off, I'm not telling you I'm not going to bet anything early in the week because
That's a good
if
point.
something's way off, I'm going to have to bet it. I'll just say, hey, I hope everything goes right. At the same time, I think that while it isn't exactly what we're talking about here, it's something that you and I have talked about some in the past, that you don't want a bunch of your lines to be way off. I've been asked this question before. Hey, my lines are all about a touchdown off. That's not a good thing. We shouldn't be too excited about that because the market is pretty efficient. We have to remember that. So while you'd like to have some edges, if you're making your own power ratings and they're all way off from the marketplace, then you're probably doing something wrong. So if we see a couple games where we have some big edges, yeah, I'll bet some of them early in the week, but I think I'll be more cautious to do that in general.
Well, once again, like I said, we're going to be doing the full audio broadcast of our ATS.io podcast here, but we will have these highlight clips. So hope you enjoyed this highlight clip, and certainly, listen back to the full show, and we will have a couple more highlight clips coming up here in a little bit.